while we always come up with creative ways and ideas for our audience, for our sponsors to engage with our audience, we can throw as many ideas against the wall to see which one sticks, but it's ultimately up to the sponsor to decide which route they're going to take. Um, you know, when we come up with event strategies, I don't think that there's one single approach that's right or wrong. I tend to take like a three-headed monster approach and see which one fits, right? Like, um, let's put a case use out there. Let's do a few different types of events. Let's see which one works. And then same with the like media and branding strategy. It's the same thing. I've been told that it takes someone around 7 times to recognize a brand or a logo before they ever actually react on it. And you know, having that multi-strategy drip campaign, whether that's through newsletters or thought leadership or podcasts, there's no real right or wrong answer, but I do think that the more you're in front of people, the more likely they'll be willing to engage with you and then consider you and want to hear you out as a thought leader.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
I'm Kevin Lee with the E-Marketing Association. I also run an agency, Did It, a nonprofit and a brand. So wear a lot of hats, including hats in the tech space with an incubator as well. I'm happy to be on with Mitchell Hirschorn, who runs sales and marketing as head of sales and partnerships with This Week in Fintech that recently ran an event called StableCon. So Mitchell, you sort of bridge the events and the publishing world as it relates to sort of meeting the needs of sponsors who want to get in touch with the folks who are either reading your content or consuming your content or at your events, and creating that kind of a win-win partnership. So I'd love to hear, when you're chatting with sponsors, how do you approach, helping them put their budgets to best use across sort of this publishing ecosystem, which includes the newsletters and the thought leadership, as well as face-to-face events?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kevin, for having me on. I think ultimately when it's all said and done, the most important thing is understanding what a client's challenges are and ultimately what are their goals and objectives. And getting a better understanding of what their challenges are, how can we help them improve what they're trying to accomplish, and then ultimately find what is the best path to helping them achieve their goals and objectives, and what type of KPIs are they using to measure success. And ultimately, we find a really good way of collaborating with the client to get them engaged with This Week in Fintech and our 190,000 subscribers that focus in the payments, banking, and fintech space.
Great. On the thought leadership side, when you're doing stuff like podcasts and white papers and other sort of consumable content that I guess folks would call advertorial or branded content in some cases, do you end up tapping into the same budgets that you do for sort of more the advertising side of things, or does that end up often being a different budget that you're tapping into?
It's a very interesting question, and depends on the conversation and the person that we're talking to. But more often than not, I end up having the conversation around, we at This Week in Fintech and StableCon, we end up being an extension of one's sales team, business development, PR and marketing, media strategy. So sometimes like executive leadership. So there's really no one particular budget that we go after. We try to go after them all, to be quite honest with you.
Right. Um, do you find that some companies have a challenge when it comes to thought leadership, and that perhaps they haven't figured out what makes them different, interesting, or sexy, and you end up having to help advise them on sort of their content strategy in order to sort of fit in with your, your newsletter subscribers or your readership to make sure that what they're creating resonates with the folks that they want to reach.
I mean, look, the beauty with This Week in Fintech is that we're a fairly nimble company, and we're able to pivot really quickly. So while we always come up with creative ways and ideas for our audience, for our sponsors to engage with our audience, we can throw as many ideas against the wall to see which one sticks, but it's ultimately up to the sponsor to decide which route they're going to take. Um, you know, when we come up with event strategies, I don't think that there's one single approach that's right or wrong. I tend to take like a three-headed monster approach and see which one fits, right? Like, um, let's put a case use out there. Let's do a few different types of events. Let's see which one works. And then same with the like media and branding strategy. It's the same thing. I've been told that it takes someone around 7 times to recognize a brand or a logo before they ever actually react on it. And you know, having that multi-strategy drip campaign, whether that's through newsletters or thought leadership or podcasts, there's no real right or wrong answer, but I do think that the more you're in front of people, the more likely they'll be willing to engage with you and then consider you and want to hear you out as a thought leader.
So I've noticed something really interesting. Love to get your point of view on it, which is sometimes publishers end up in the events business and it becomes a really strong revenue leg for them. Sometimes event businesses decide that in order to keep sort of continuity between their events, they start looking like publishers, right? So they decide, okay, I can't just wait until 3 months before my event and then start blasting the heck out of my subscribers or my newsletter list. And as a result of those sort of two types of organizations sort of moving in the opposite direction, they have very different policies around having other press or having press at their events, right? And so since you guys sort of sit in both of those camps, I'm curious as to how you guys think about it, right? Because if a reporter from the Wall Street Journal wants to show up at your event, well, obviously they're going to have a different way of covering your event than you might cover it. And at the same time, you're sort of thinking, well, I mean, technically they compete with us as a publisher, but then again, it's the Wall Street Journal, right? So if they end up deciding that they'd like to cover your event, I've had some folks that have said to me, under my e-marketing association hat, when I sort of act like press, like, oh no, no, we don't want to allow any press in there because, we're an event that's run by a publishing company and they have like a complete blackout on all forms of press. And then we find these others that are sort of like, no, that would be sort of silly for us to, not allow any other press coverage or event just because we're a publisher. So how have you and the team thought that through, right? As to, our press invited to cover events, are they, do you sort of embargo certain things for yourselves and try to make sure you get the scoop when it comes to that kind of thing? How have you thought that through strategically?
It's a great question, and I think it's a fine line of balance, but you always have to, you can have like a general rule of thumb, and then there's an exception to every rule. That being said, Wall Street Journal, you're always welcome to come to StableCon. You're happy to reach out to us anytime. We would love for you to cover our event. And in that regard, and it's the same across every other major news publication. When news is being announced on StableCon stages, we want it to reach every corner of the earth. And if it means having peer partnerships and relationships with other media companies and having a media and a PR strategy for our own event, we love that. We encourage it. if there's a TV publication that wants to report live from StableCon in 2026, which is happening in Washington, D.C. from September 9th to 11th, we would love that. CNBC wants to report live, let's have them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm an investor in the Possible conference, which is already sold after between its second and third year. But they have very much sort of um, a publisher, pro broadcaster perspective. Obviously, those same publishers and broadcasters, because they're in advertising, want to be at that show anyway. So it's sort of a win-win from that perspective. I'd love to get a sense as to for the live in-person events. Um, what resonates most strongly with most of your clients as it relates to, you know, uh, pure lead gen versus the meet and greets and the face-to-face conversations, so are they sponsoring things like the drinks and the lunches or the networking breaks? Do they want to do their thought leadership from the stage and then have an opportunity to sort of meet the people and discuss it afterwards after they've sort of broadcast their point of view? Do they enjoy doing the roundtables, or the fireside chats? Like, what's really sort of resonating with most of those folks that you chat with?
Um, can I be politically correct and say all of the above?
Sure.
I think look, I think it goes back to the very original question that you asked, which is what, me uncovering what is a company's goals and objectives, what is their challenge, what are they trying to accomplish, and then going back and building out a strategy to help them accomplish that, right? Some people are a small company and they're trying to get on stage to get, recognition and be perceived as a thought leader. Other incumbents are looking to maintain their, you know, footing in their hold in the ecosystem. They don't want the new people to come in and um, disrupt what they already have going. So I think to answer your question, I think we had 18 side events that took place in and around StableCon, that both we had a part of, as well as other companies just go and do their thing. Um, and, it's all about bringing the community get together. So if that's what ends up happening, no problem. But we also fully encourage companies to, partner with StableCon so we can help promote their brand and bring them to, the number one event in stablecoin innovation for the payments, banking, and fintech community.
So I'm curious. Obviously, you picked DC for the event later this year, which not everyone thinks of that as a conference venue location, but I'd imagine that the fact that there's a fair amount of regulatory oversight, you know, settling down and dust settling around that within the general crypto market as well as the stable coins in particular. Was that a huge factor for you, in that you could more easily get folks from the sort of political and regulatory side of things to participate in the event if you held it in DC?
It wasn't something that we yes, it was something that we definitely looked into, to saying, a couple of things. Where's a venue that we can continue to grow? As our event grows, can we stay there for a few years and grow with the event? Is it a city that can take international flights? Because
Right.
many of the stablecoin and payment community, payment banking, fintech community are international. We're seeing a lot of folks coming from the LATAM market, Europe, Africa, as well as the US and North America. Um, so that was important to us. Is there an airport that can handle international flights? And DC is going to be awesome. We're really looking forward to it. The venue has a lot of opportunity for us to do some creative ideas and some creative ways to bring the community together. So we really leaned heavily into DC, and we love the opportunity that we have going forth next year.
Great, great. Let's talk a little bit about content types and as it relates to sort of findability and searchability and wearing my did it hat. We do a lot of work in SEO and have since before Google existed. And sort of the hot topic now is sort of call it generative engine optimization or answer engine optimization is sort of, knowing whether or not ChatGPT is going to bring up a brand in a search or not. And one of the things we spend a lot of time talking about is content types, right? Because obviously there's textual content, which gets ingested by crawlers, but crawlers are also ingesting social media posts, they're ingesting videos, they're ingesting the transcripts of audio and video podcasts. So have you found that the PR teams in particular or the corporate communications teams that that's on their radar yet, that they're thinking about like the SEO and GEO side of content when they're negotiating branded content deals or trying to get editorial coverage?
I mean, it's definitely something that comes up, whether it is, you know, the call to action strategy or the number of clicks that someone gets or the number of traffic that someone gets on their website. But I think it's not just a one-off type of opportunity, but it's more so like a play that a strategy that they're putting in place for maybe a quarter. And we're really looking to drive organic traffic, but there are definitely, opportunities for that. Yes.
And on the newsletters, one of the things a lot of publishers struggle with is sort of the general newsletter that goes out to sort of everybody that potentially has nearly all the subscribers, and then niching it out into segments, right? And at what point does a topic deserve another separate newsletter, right, with a separate editorial team? And of course, then you have to add it to your rate card as an option, right? You can either, buy us sort of run of network, or you can buy us on the individual newsletter basis. I'd love
Yep.
to hear sort of how you guys think that through and have thought that through, because you do have more than one newsletter, right? And deciding that the topic is sort of hot enough that it deserves its own coverage is probably not trivial.
It's true. And, fortunately, we have multiple editors across the different newsletters, and, you know, we give them full editorial right to write what is happening or what's on their mind. Um, Plenty of people submit opportunities and news and partnerships or deal alerts or announcements that they think are worthy of our newsletter. Um, and the beauty of our newsletter is that we have editorial right to pick and choose what we put in there. And I think Nick and the entire content team has done a phenomenal job over the last 6 years of really creating a newsletter that delivers information that's quick, easy, and fun to digest. Most important thing is making fintech fun. And I think that's what This Week in Fintech does.
So I'm friendly with a bunch of folks on both the editorial and biz dev side of other, let's say, financial or wealth related content. Um, and sometimes the topic is pretty niche, but it attracts advertisers that are sort of not necessarily directly on point with the content. And I'm curious whether you're starting to field calls from folks who are potentially outside of fintech, but yet have a strong interest in your audience. Obviously luxury automotive and premium golf vacations, things like that are sort of, you would imagine that your readership might resonate with that, but at the same time, they might be a little surprised, like, wait, why am I seeing a luxury car ad in here? Like I'm used to seeing, guys in the fintech industry with their ads. Have you started to sort of mix it up and take advantage of the unique demographics and psychographics of your audience for advertisers sort of outside of fintech?
I love that. I think I'm going to have to start opening up a new category of merchants to be going after. And it's funny that you say that. A friend of mine who's a big wine aficionado actually said that to me. And he was like, you should be reaching out to some of these, like, crazy wine collecting sites or whatever. I don't know. Gary V has a wine collecting something. Um, and I didn't put two and two together, but that's an opportunity. Or like, I don't know, like the Lamborghini like car
Exactly.
dealership in Manhattan, right? I mean, so not so far like to the left, like to one side. I would say it is starting to evolve where like AI call centers or AI chat bots, and they're like, oh, the companies that you attract or the companies that come to your newsletter are the ones that we're trying to talk to, and that's the route that they want to take. So it may not be necessarily the head of customer experience and customer success, um, but it's the right companies that are in there, and that's the route that they're going. But we are seeing that the the different job titles are really becoming more expansive, that follow our newsletters.
Yeah, cool. I'd love to switch gears to like your day to day, right? Which is, as somebody in a sales role, right? You have to figure out how to make the best use of your time. So essentially you're a marketer yourself, right? Because you're trying to get in front of all those folks who might be a perfect fit for your audiences in one or more forms. So, how should other folks who wear your hat of being in biz dev and sales, deal with the new reality of the clutter, right? Which is that, it's getting tougher and tougher to reach out and break through, assuming you know this company that's like perfect for your audience. You have to identify them, use your tools and maybe get their contact information, but then, you have to organize your day around that and potentially your teams, right, who may be helping you. So, what's working these days, for you in being able to reach out to folks as you go through your prospecting and your sales cycle.
I think persistency works, right? Being pleasantly persistent. And if you know, or if you have an inkling that you think that someone is the right fit or their competitor is at your event, um, I mean, I leave no stone unturned until someone tells me to take a hike. Um, I'm gonna try to convince them that they need to be at this event, or they need to be in our newsletter, or they need to be doing a breakfast, or hosted breakfast, or whatever the solution is. But going back to what is the challenge, and it's like, hey, I'm working with your biggest competitor. Um, do you want to have a seat at the table when customers are going to talk to them? So I think that's one aspect of it. And look, I don't think that there's a right or wrong way of getting in touch with someone. I mean, I talk to, pick a Gen X, Y, Z, A, like I talk to them all, and it's wild, but I talk to people on email. The community within the stablecoin community is a very Telegram focused community. I have learned Telegram communication very quickly, from so Telegram, WhatsApp, text, email, LinkedIn chat, um, a phone. Do people still pick up the phone and actually take a call? Like I would love to get in back into like picking up the phone and dialing a number and cold calling, but I don't think anyone's going to answer like a random number. Like there's so much technology from the telcos to like, so I, I'd love the old school phone call to come back and
It's
be a thing
fascinating.
again.
It's fascinating you bring that up. I spun out of my incubator recently something called Voiceu, which is AI powered voicemail drops that are hyper personalized, right? Because I also felt like we needed to get back to phone, but at the same time, I couldn't be leaving dozens of voicemail messages, and neither could my team because they're going to get voicemail 95% of the time. But I still wanted to hyper personalize the voicemail. So I built a system to do that. We'll see, it's just releasing now. So we'll see how well it works. But, I sort of felt like, some form of personalization, but a form of automation at the same time would be sort of a win-win. You'll have to ask me in 6 months how that worked out. But
Well, you'll have to have me on the podcast again. I would love to fill me back in.
absolutely. Well, thanks so much for sharing your wisdom, in particular for those folks wearing the biz dev and sales hat. I think persistence is a great point, and the fact that you have to be sort of channel agnostic, right, and find the channel that your people hang out in, right, even if it's a one-to-one channel, because I'm sure that most of the folks listening to this don't even have Telegram installed, much less active on Telegram. And within crypto, Telegram's a really important platform for sure. And WhatsApp for international audiences, also a must have for sure. So I think salespeople are going to be installing a bunch more apps on their phones after they listen to this.
Well, I don't get a cut of any of the revenue from the App Store, but like you said, it's all about meeting your client and your customer where they want you to meet them, and being in a comfortable setting that they want to communicate you with. So, greatly appreciate you having me on. Happy to share any insights and wisdoms, and if anyone wants to reach out, happy to have a conversation on a phone call with you.
Yeah, could do that. Or your LinkedIn is pretty easy to find. So certainly folks can find you there.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks again, Mitchell, for joining me.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.